Welcome back in on a Wednesday morning, everybody, to the Stadium Seat Sports podcast. As always, my name is Coop, here with my co-host Kriv. We're going to go ahead and recap this past weekend's games in college football. We're absolutely blessed with some incredible games, including an absolute thriller on Friday night, and then capping it off with a great game in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night, which we will discuss both of those games. So, Kriv, if you want to take it away here, I think the first game we're going to start with is going to be Oklahoma State taking on Kansas State.
Yeah, and I think this game stood out to us mostly because Kansas State had lost the previous week. I can't recall how many times they turned the ball over, but it was quite a lot. And I think the biggest difference this week was they turned it over one time, and they ran for 300 yards and just completely dominated. They had 300 yards to 126, and I think you mentioned that Ollie Gordon was going to be key to the game for Oklahoma State if they wanted to win this one.
Yep.
And I mean, he had a reasonable game, 76 yards, 5 yards a carry, but honestly did not do enough. Alan Bowman, I mean, he threw 50 passes. He put up a good amount of yards, but he had 2 picks. I mean, Oklahoma State never quite looked right in this game, and Kansas State pretty much controlled it from start to finish. DJ Giddens, almost 200 yards rushing by himself, and Avery Johnson, I mean, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you're getting that from your quarterback spot. So just complete and utter domination on the ground with low turnovers. You're going to win 99% of the time. So I picked Kansas State in this game. I probably didn't think they'd win by 22, but they definitely showed up and they bounced back strong after last week.
Yeah, no, I think you hit a lot of the talking points on the head, or nail on the head, really. In discussing this game, and that game against BYU the previous week for Kansas State was a bit of an enigma in my mind. Give by BYU all the credit in the world, but I think Kansas State was better than what the final score in that game indicated. We've talked about Avery Johnson. I think he's got so much talent behind him, but he's a young quarterback, and I think he went into that environment against BYU and struggled a bit and showed his youth. I thought he really bounced back in this game. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. He averaged 12 yards a carry on his, he had 5 carries for 60 yards in this game. He had 3 touchdown passes, had the 1 interception, but that was significantly better than what he and Kansas State had done the previous week against BYU in terms of their turnovers. And you mentioned it, Bowman for Oklahoma State had the 1 touchdown. His stats weren't overall too bad, but the 2 picks, significantly hurts you. And I believe this was Ollie Gordon II's most rushing yards this year at 76. He may have had slightly more rushing yards in their initial game against, was it San Diego State, I believe. He may have had more yards in that game. Yeah, he had 126 yards in that game. But this was his second most yards, but 76 yards for Ollie Gordon II. After the incredible season he had last year, it's a significant drop-off. I mean, in 2022, he was averaging 5 yards a carry. Last year with his incredible season, 6.1 yards a carry. This year, 3.8. I mean, that is a difference to me in this Oklahoma State team sitting there at 3-2 and, underperforming, I think, in a lot of people's eyes from what they expected. And it kind of seems like, the trend when you expect Mike Gundy and his team to do well, they kind of, plateau a little bit and they don't reach those expectations. And then when you're not really talking about Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State, that's when the expectations are exceeded in my mind. So it's really kind of a strange thing to me because I think Oklahoma State has some talent and they can really compete in the Big 12. And I believe in Mike Gundy as a coach, but this game was all Kansas State, Avery Johnson. That team really showed up and bounced back. And that's exactly what you want to see from this Kansas State team. You took an ugly loss on the road the previous week against BYU, and you came back and just absolutely dominated one of your conference, opponents here. So kudos to them. They're 4-1, ranked, I think, 23rd in the AP Top 25. They may have moved up a little bit this past week with the new rankings, but they've got everything in front of them, man. And especially with Utah taking that loss, that's not one of the games we're going to be talking about here. So Kansas State's got a lot to play for. So excited to see what they do the rest of the way.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely a team to keep an eye on, and I think another team to keep an eye on that we kind of touched on last week was Notre Dame. They finally had another big game on their schedule here, and they have had a chance to kind of show themselves and kind of get that resume right and get back right back into the thick of the playoff hunt. And I'll kind of let you take things here at first.
Yeah, This game was an interesting game to me because if I remember correctly, I think I may have taken Louisville in this game. I would have to go back and kind of rewatch our previous episode and see, but I do believe I took Louisville in this game. And, they only lost by a touchdown, but I thought in watching this game, I was significantly more impressed with Notre Dame overall. To me, Riley Leonard is becoming more comfortable in the pocket. He's not wowing you with his arm. I mean, he had 163 yards in this game through the air, but he had 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, still carried the ball, a pretty significant amount. He threw 23 times and he carried the ball 13 times. But we've talked about Riley Leonard and this Notre Dame team in general, and that's really who he is as a quarterback. He's more dual threat and honestly kind of relies more heavily on the run. But they've got a great running back in, Jeremiah Love that we've touched on, multiple times already in this year. And this was a big win for Notre Dame after taking that really ugly loss against Northern Illinois a few weeks back. And I had said after that game, when we were doing the recap, like in my opinion, I thought a loss to Northern Illinois should kind of be like a de facto, you're eliminated from the 12-team playoff. That was just my take. Obviously, that's not the case. Like, that's not realistic, especially with a 12-team playoff. Like Notre Dame, if they run the table the rest of the way, they're going to find themselves in the dance at the end of the year. And if they continue to get better and better and better as the year goes on after taking that ugly loss, then you know what, more power to them. And they'll be a team that, can be a difficult out for somebody in the 12-team playoff. So kudos to them on this win. Louisville, they do still have everything in front of them. They're sitting there at 3-1. This was a loss to a ranked opponent. This is not anything to hang their heads on. I do think that, they had opportunities to win this game. Tyler Show, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, not 100% certain. Honestly, didn't have, too bad of a game. He did have a pick, but he had 3 touchdowns through the air. Like that's about expected for him. And I thought that he handled himself, pretty well in this game. And I thought that this was overall just like a closely contested game, a big win for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame to kind of keep their 12-team playoff hopes alive and, aspirations of competing for, a national championship. Obviously, they got to get in the big dance to make that happen. And so kudos to them. Hard fought win for them, and excited to see what both of these teams do the rest of the way because neither of their seasons are over here. So
yeah, and I agree with that assessment. The one thing that really stood out to me about this game, well, it's really 2 things. One, I think Notre Dame's path to victory is kind of what they did in this game here. So Riley Leonard was not very explosive. He didn't put up a ton of yards. Obviously, they leaned on his legs quite a bit. And that was kind of the formula to win when they were at Texas A&M. He just doesn't have a lot of ability to consistently rely upon him to make plays down the field with his arm. One of his touchdowns was to Jeremiah Love, and I think it was a screen. So, I mean, you look at the body of work, and it's all about being hyper efficient, not turning the ball over. And really just giving that defense a chance to win the game for them. I don't think they have enough firepower. I know they scored 31 points, but I just don't see the firepower there to win against any elite team. And that's where that defense has to come through for them. So that their defense showed out, 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. They deflected 8 passes.
Wow.
Which is honestly incredible for a college team to do that. Yeah. And then the other thing that stood out to me was Louisville literally – They got more passing yards by 100 yards. They outrushed Notre Dame by just a slim margin, and they lost. And the turnover margin was only it was 3 on Louisville and 2 on Notre Dame. And honestly, like with all things being equal, you would say, hey, the team that passed for more yards and rushed for more yards and only had one more turnover probably would win this game. But I think that's just a testament to Notre Dame's defense holding strong and not giving up any big plays, and limiting scoring opportunities off turnovers. So for me, Notre Dame's going to have to play very similar to this and try to find a way to generate some bigger passing plays if they want to make some real noise come the playoffs. But they're right in the thick of it now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the next game we're gonna jump into here was absolutely the game of the weekend, and honestly could end up being the game of the year. And that was number 2 Georgia traveling to Tuscaloosa to take on number 4 Alabama. So if you want to kick this one off, I think we both have a lot to say about this game. So I'm interested to hear your takes on it.
Yeah, so I'll be the first to admit I picked Georgia to win this game, and that was mainly because Kalen DeBoer was in the first big rivalry matchup of his Alabama coaching career, and I think that could be a lot for a new coach, and he showed a lot in this game, and so did Alabama. Obviously, Bama jumps out to that 28-0 lead. I think everyone's like, okay, this is over. Carson Beck was making mistake after mistake. He did not look good at all. He was the preseason Heisman favorite, or at least the second highest Heisman favorite out there, and he has not looked like it so far. But that second half showed a lot for Georgia. Carson Beck flipped a switch, and he just started taking shots downfield. He was not afraid. Those mistakes went away, and you saw what everyone was hoping to see with Carson Beck at the start of the year. But the problem is he played so poorly in the first half that none of that mattered. Jalen Milroe played as close to a perfect first half as you can imagine, and obviously not as great in the second half, but man, coming back from that lead, Georgia taking the lead back somehow and then losing it and then having a chance to take the lead again at the end, it was pure chaos. Definitely one of the most funny games I've watched. That final, I think it was final 4 or 5 minutes of that fourth quarter were just insane. That is why college football is better than the NFL. You would never see that in the NFL.
Nope.
And of course, Ryan Williams, man, that guy, 17. It's so crazy. 17 years old. He's on another planet. That spin move. I mean, he got 2 Georgia defenders. These are highly recruited, highly talented defenders, and that spin move took them both out of the play. And his acceleration out of the spin move was unreal. It's like he hit his top speed again instantly. And that was the ultimate bailout play. They were like, hey, our offense has been sputtering and we're down somehow. Let's just throw it to our weapon, and he got it done. So major kudos to Alabama. I think they've put themselves in a great spot to finish out the year in the top 4 potentially. Georgia, I think they're still extremely talented. They definitely could have won that game somehow. But with that schedule coming up and Georgia already having a loss, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I don't know if they can make the playoffs. They're going to have to play close to perfect the rest of the year. They have to play Texas. I know Ole Miss just lost, but that's still going to be a tough game. I mean, this is not going to be a cakewalk for them. They are not built the same way of Georgia teams in years past. They're definitely talented, and they're definitely just as talented as other teams they've had, but the way they're composed, especially on the offensive side, is a reason for concern for me.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on this tons of great points. And I mean, you can let me know, here in my initial take, if it's controversial, but I came out of this game almost equally as impressed with both teams. Now, with that being said, Georgia had a pretty horrific first half. However, being down 28-0 after the first quarter, and for Georgia to come back and then take the lead, obviously they eventually lose by a final score of 41-34 because Alabama, give them all the credit in the world, but you saw what this Georgia team is capable of being when that switch is flipped. And so that is why I'm saying I'm pretty much equally as impressed, leaning slightly towards Alabama, in terms of more impressed. But Georgia to me is absolutely still one of the 10 best teams in the country, bar none. We dropped our first ever college football top 10 this weekend, and we had them at number 8, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly. The AP poll had them even higher. I think the AP poll had them at 5. So, Georgia really did not get punished for this loss, nor should they. I mean, it was an incredible game. They started out as poorly as you possibly could, but you saw the potential that Georgia has. And that is a team that was down by 4 touchdowns and eventually came back to take the lead, albeit they lose the game in the end. So Georgia's a very scary team to me if they can play with that fire, that intensity, and they can flip that switch. Carson Beck looks significantly better in the second half there after really kind of looking like a deer in the headlights in the first half, which is not something you would have expected for what many consider to be the bona fide number 1 quarterback coming into this upcoming NFL draft. So, a little bit strange from him, but ultimately he kind of, steadied himself and really kind of put on a show there in the second half. And I want to ask you this and our viewers this, if they want to drop a comment in, down below when we post the video. Are the 2 best receivers in college football both true freshmen in Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith? Because I think they are. Like, these 2 young men have come in here in their first years, and I mean, they're the 2 best receivers in college football that I've seen this year. And like 17 and 18 years old. Like, it's wild to say, but they are, in my opinion.
It's insane to say that on the surface, but I think if you watch both guys on the field, they are just on another level.
They are.
And I feel like every couple of years there's like a generational receiver that shows up and you just go, wow.
Yeah.
Very rarely do you have 2 of those at the same time. And not only that, one way of looking at this too, which should blow a lot of people's minds, this is going to be the worst version of both of them.
Yeah,
they're only going to get better. It's crazy. Like, you look at Jeremiah Smith, especially. This is no slight to Ryan Williams, who's 17. Jeremiah Smith, at 18 years old, he looks like an NFL player.
Yeah,
like if you saw him lined up on the NFL sideline, you'd be, oh yeah, that's an NFL receiver. And he's literally 18.
Yeah.
It's truly amazing. And I know people want to kind of pit them against each other, but I think they're both so special and their games kind of differ a tiny bit, but I think I say just enjoy it. I mean, this is rare air, and we get to see 2 guys just ascend at a level we have not seen in a long time.
Yeah, no, and I just wanted to throw that out to you, and I want to throw that out to our viewers and our listeners, because in my opinion, they are the 2 best wide receivers in college football, both true freshmen. And as you said, they're only going to get better, and it's like the perfect out for both of these teams. Alabama, you're in trouble, throw it up to number 2. Ohio State, you're in trouble, throw it up to number 4. And it's just like a get out of jail free card. Those guys are absolutely ridiculous. And as you mentioned, you can talk about them, you can compare their games, but ultimately what we should really be doing is just having, truly awe-inspiring, viewership of these 2 absolutely incredible players that we're going to have the pleasure of getting to watch for the next, couple of years before they head off to the next level. So really, really impressed by Ryan Williams. Jalen Milroe, I thought, was phenomenal in this game. He showcased the reason that he was one of the Heisman, front runners coming into this year. If he plays like that, this Alabama team can compete with and can beat anybody in the country. So I was very impressed with them. Kalen DeBoer, huge statement win in his first year as the Alabama head coach, and a little bit of a head scratcher. Like, it makes a bit more sense. And this is no slight to Kalen DeBoer. Kirby Smart 1-6 against Alabama as the head coach of Georgia.
Yeah.
Again, granted, 5 of those losses were against Nick Saban. So again, you get a little bit of a pass there because Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach of all time. But I don't know if it's just the Alabama kryptonite, because I was thinking it was the Nick Saban kryptonite. But give Kalen DeBoer and Alabama credit. And to your point, you kind of mentioned I think a little bit of like a lackadaisical nature to the Georgia offense. And to me, I agree. I think Carson Beck's great. I think Etienne is a very serviceable running back. The problem to me, they don't have a Brock Bowers. They don't have a Ladd McConkey. They don't have that dude on offense like they've had in years past with all these great Georgia teams that I feel like can be like their out pitch, where it's like a Ryan Williams for Alabama, a Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State. Like, I don't feel like Georgia has that on offense, and maybe they do talent wise, and that person just has not emerged yet. But I haven't seen who that person is yet for Georgia, and I think that has been part of their struggles. So again, I feel very good about both of these teams, that both of these teams are absolutely top 12 teams in the country. Give all the credit in the world to Alabama. This was a hard-fought, incredible game, one that you just makes you fall in love with college football all over again. Not that any of us need help with that, but this is just something that makes college football so special. You touched on it. It's just something that sets college football apart from everything else. So loved that game. Incredible effort by both teams, and can't wait to see what else we have in store for the rest of the season. I hope we get a similar game when we get Ohio State traveling out to Eugene to take on Oregon here in a couple of weeks. I hope we get another instant classic. But in talking about those two Big Ten teams, let's throw it over to another couple Big Ten teams here that we had previewed for this previous weekend's games, and that was Illinois taking on Penn State. So I'll let you take this one here. And then I'll give you my thoughts.
Yeah, so obviously this was our pick of the week. I believe the spread was minus 19.5.
Yep.
So obviously that did not come to fruition for Penn State, and our Illinois pick of the week came through. The one thing to take away here is, and I truly believe this, is that Penn State's defense is a top 10 defense.
Yep.
I don't know if that's a shocking statement or anything, but we kind of hit on it last week where we said for this game, Drew Aller's going to kind of have to show something. And I mean, he was decent. Nothing special. I mean, they only scored 21 points, and not a big barn burner here by any means. So I think Illinois is just a well-coached team that took on the persona of Brett Bielema. I mean, they don't have a ton of talent, but they definitely maximize it. Whereas, at least offensively speaking, it was almost disappointing to see how that Penn State offense operated. And maybe it's because they played into Illinois' hands there, and Illinois just had a great defensive scheme or whatever that might be. But honestly, very low passing yards, which, I mean, we just want to see Drew Aller show out. Like, I don't need to see him game manage or anything like that, or just be hyper efficient. I want to see him make those big plays he made week 1 against West Virginia, week in, week out. Because that's going to be the difference maker when Penn State has to play Ohio State or Michigan or whoever else is on that calendar. Or if they make it to the playoffs, they need that. Because what they showed defensively, great. Yeah. They held them in check very well. I mean, Illinois could not move the ball on the ground whatsoever. But man, it's just like it's that offensive outlook for them year after year that if they can just figure that out, they can hit the next level. And believe me, they ran the ball all over Illinois, but that passing attack is just another concern for me. And I'm not surprised they didn't cover against Illinois, because they just don't have the explosiveness they need right now. They have the potential, but they don't have the explosiveness they need to be a true contender.
Yeah, no, and I think you touched on some really good things there. They do actually not have Michigan this year on the schedule, which honestly I think is one they've struggled with in years past and probably would handle Michigan pretty easily
Yeah,
this year because
yeah.
Michigan is so void of any kind of passing attack, at least at this point in Alex Orji's young
It
career.
it was more figure
Uh,
of speech for me.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. But just wanted to, I agree with you. That defense is elite. That defense to me is tier one, or at the very lowest, it's upper echelon of tier two. The offense to me it's just a huge concern because like Drew Aller in this game had 0 touchdowns. He didn't have a single passing touchdown in this game. Like he had a QBR of 80.4, like that's fine. He didn't turn the ball over, which is great. That's always, a potential big momentum, changer, especially in college football. But like Penn State is not going to reach the goals that they are capable of reaching if this offense does not take the next step, or really the next several steps. Like we thought, with new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki coming in here, that this Penn State offense was going to be explosive, and we saw parts of that in that West Virginia game, like you mentioned. We were like, okay, this is week 1 of the year, and they're looking like they might take that next step offensively. And like ever since that game, like they really just have not. They've really regressed in my mind, and probably in the mind of a lot of viewers, and maybe even a lot of Penn State fans. And it's like that as a Penn State fan, like you have to be so, frustrated. Like, yeah, you're sitting there, you're number 9 in the country, you're 4-0, like that's all well and great, but you have such a talented team that can achieve so much more than what you have been achieving, under James Franklin as head coach. And in order for them to do anything of major consequence, which they're capable of from a talent standpoint, that offense has to hit a completely other gear. And it's really just a wait and see. And we've been saying that for years and years and years, and it's yet to happen. And so I'm skeptical that it will. I mean, great win. Illinois was a ranked team. As you said, Illinois is just one of those teams year in and year out. They kind of take on the persona of their coach, Brett Bielema, hard nosed, tough, gritty. In this game, what was kind of disappointing to me, and I didn't, expect Illinois to win this game outright. But we had kind of seen a different Luke Altmaier so far this year. Like he looked poised in the pocket. He was getting the ball out on time. His reads were correct. Like he was looking like a very poised, accurate college football quarterback, and he really, really struggled in this game. And I'm not going to put it all on Luke Altmaier. I don't think he had anywhere close to his best game by any means, but I'm going to give a lot of credit to that Penn State defense because the Penn State defense is very, very good. Like they really are. They are one of the top 5, 6 defenses in all of college football in my mind. But you mentioned it. Like really, the star of the show for Penn State in this game was their defense, and then their rushing attack. Katron Allen, had 102 yards. Nicholas Singleton had 94 yards. Both of those guys had a touchdown. And then Tyler Warren for them had their other touchdown. And so, give credit to Penn State. They came out with a victory against a ranked opponent. That's great. But, from a college football fan perspective and from a Penn State perspective, if they're going to reach anywhere close to the goals that, they're capable of reaching, that offense is going to have to continue to take significant strides forward because they're even with how good their defense is. They have to play the likes of Ohio State. They have to play the likes of Oregon. Those teams have great to potentially elite offenses. They're going to score some points no matter how good your defense is. And if Penn State cannot keep up offensively, then I mean they're going to find themselves suffering a couple losses at the hands of some really good to elite offensive teams who also have very good to potentially elite defenses. So that's got to take a step forward if you're Penn State. You got some time to figure it out before you welcome in Ohio State, but time is ticking. So interested to see how that progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last game we have here was our upset of the week, and it very, very nearly happened. But I'll let you take it away. And of course, we're talking about Virginia Tech at Miami.
This game was, I mean, talk about one of the most controversial endings of like recent memory for me. I mean, I had to have rewatched this game and especially the ending at least half a dozen times. Like, I was trying to get so many different angles to see if the Virginia Tech player caught the ball. Did he not catch the ball? Was there control? Was there not control? Was he inbounds? Like, so many different questions were going through my head. The one thing that was shocking to me, John, and I think you'll probably agree with this, and I think most of our viewers and listeners will agree with this. Even I think Miami Hurricane fans would probably agree with this. They had called the call on the field a touchdown, and I didn't see anything from the replay and all the angles we got that was completely 100% definitive enough to tell me you have to reverse that call. So to me, it was shocking. And that's why I thought it was so important that they called touchdown on the field, because had they not called a touchdown and they had called incomplete, then I can absolutely see it standing as like no touchdown, because there wasn't anything that I saw from all of the angles that we got to see in slow motion and all of this stuff that told me definitively to change what the initial call was. So I was really surprised by that, and I think probably a lot of Virginia Tech fans were quite upset at that, and are probably still quite upset. And I think they very much so have a right to be upset with with that call. And talking about this game overall, like, I really don't know how to feel about Miami. Like, I was so high on Miami for the last several weeks. They had they looked great against in that initial win against Florida, but obviously we know Florida and Billy Napier are just an absolute dumpster fire. Like, I think the world of Cam Ward. I think he's an absolutely incredible player, and he played overall pretty darn well in this game. I mean, he had four total touchdowns, or excuse me, actually five total touchdowns, because he had a rushing touchdown. He did have two picks, which obviously want to kind of keep the turnovers to a minimum. So I, give Miami credit for winning this game. An in-conference game, a gritty Virginia Tech team. Like, they came out and they took care of business, so to speak. But on a week-to-week basis, I cannot figure this Miami team out. On 1 week, I think they're the absolute clear front runner in the ACC, especially after that drubbing Clemson took week 1 against Georgia. But now Clemson's been looking better and better and better. And I'm not completely sold or back on Clemson, but if you told me Clemson and Miami were lining up next week to play, a couple weeks ago, I would have told you I'm picking Miami by probably 7 to 10 or more. To now, it would be like an even line, almost like a push with this game. I just don't know what to think of Miami. I don't think the ACC overall is very good, so Miami still has a very good chance to win it, to make the postseason and be one of those top 4 seeds. But I thought this was kind of a sloppy game for Miami that they ultimately came out and won, and that's the most important thing. But I did want to give Virginia Tech a lot of credit. I think Kyron Drones played a pretty solid game. Obviously, he had a couple touchdowns, and he did have the interception, but I didn't think that he got significantly outplayed by Cam Ward. Like, I thought Cam Ward was better, and he threw for significantly more yards, but I thought Kyron Jones held his own in this game. And I want to give some credit to Virginia Tech, but really I think the big storyline is a controversial call at the ending. So I'm kind of interested to hear your thoughts and our viewers' thoughts on what was called and then ultimately reversed.
Yeah, so for me, a few points, but I'll start with the call at the end there. I seen that play live. I do not think that should have been ruled a touchdown on the field. But with that being said, it was ruled a touchdown on the field, and there was not enough evidence, in my opinion, to say definitively that was not a touchdown. And that's the problem. Because one, it should have never been called a touchdown, and after it was, it should not have been reversed. Even though I felt like it all kind of cascaded from the call on the field. So I think Miami's extremely lucky to have escaped that. They probably should have lost. Seeing Kyron Drones and Cam Ward go head to head was great. Apparently they're also cousins, which is super cool.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that two guys were just balling out against each other head to head. So that was really cool. Little storyline. I thought Drones made a lot of clutch plays. He definitely did everything he could in his power to keep that team in it. And Virginia Tech, I mean, that was a gutsy performance, and they had their shot, and I don't want to say it was stolen from them, but it definitely doesn't feel quite right with how it ended. But yeah, going to Miami, Cam Ward, I mean, he looks very good, very special. I think he's number 2 in Heisman odds now. But he just continues to turn the ball over. And maybe you can get away with that when you're playing Virginia Tech. But honestly, like, you cannot have that kind of performance and expect to win against a top 5, top 10 team.
Sure.
But he kind of helps, the way he plays helps you look past his turnovers. But I mean, 2 interceptions, he lost the ball to. That he cannot do that. And if they didn't win this game and he had those turnover stats, he would not be number 2 in Heisman voting today, or at least Heisman odds. So
Sure.
just keeping that in mind, that yes, the outcome of the game probably determined how we look at his performance. I mean, he did clutch up and he did help them win that game when it counted the most, which is very important. But that's one thing that really stands out to me as a concern. And then, I mean, obviously, Miami, their defense, you can't give up 34 points to Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, that's the most points, second most points that Virginia Tech has scored this year. And the most they scored before that was 37 against Old Dominion. So I know you can't say game to game, it's going to play out the same, but yeah, defensively, Miami, they need to step it up. Also, Cam Ward, I mean, incredible talent. He's probably gonna make it to New York if he keeps this up for the Heisman ceremony. But those timely turnovers, man, that's a dangerous game. And you run up against the wrong team, it's gonna be over real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, incredibly appreciative of anybody that interacts with us, watches our videos. Like, comment, subscribe, drop your comments down below. Let us know your thoughts. This one did run a little bit longer, but we had such great games this past weekend. We wanted to kind of do right by them and kind of give a little bit more analysis than we typically jump into. With that being said, we will see you guys with the next video. We'll be dropping a week 6 preview video for some of these upcoming college football games, and that's likely going to drop either Thursday morning or Friday morning. So keep an eye out for that, and we will see you guys then.